That's right. We are joined now. We're back with Jeff Young of Round the Foghorn, editor for Round the Foghorn. We got Jeff back. Jeff, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, hey, how's it going, Alan? Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, let's start here. So, the Giants, Jeff, I don't know if you knew this or not, but they are always a topic of conversation with the fans on whether or not Farhan is doing a good job, and some fans just like to complain. I try to be somewhere in the middle, but at times I fall on too far on one side or the other. You do a really great job of just giving the facts, and that's why we love having you on, Jeff. Let's start it with a simple one. Are the Giants making the playoffs? What do you think? Are they making the playoffs or not?
Well, I mean, the odds are not necessarily in their favor. There's 45 games left to go. There's six or seven or even eight teams vying for a playoff spot or a wild card spot. It's probably going to take 86 to 87 wins to reach to be a wild card team this year. The Giants have to play 600 baseball for the remainder of the year to even sniff the playoff conversation. It feels like, and the time to do it, the time to bank wins is now, where the schedule is a little softer with teams like the Tigers and the White Sox coming in. But when you look at that September schedule, it's going to be pretty brutal. I think they have six against the Diamondbacks, six against the Padres. They'll be playing the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Orioles. It's going to be a tough matchup. So really, the next couple of weeks is going to determine whether they really have a shot. But as of right now, I mean, the odds aren't in their favor. But hey, crazier things have happened.
Talking to Jeff Young, editor for Round the Foghorn. Jeff, I've been complaining a little bit and saying let the kids play. And there was a report back when I was in the Bay Area about Marco. This was maybe close to 2 years ago, that Marco Luciano, they weren't sure what they were going to do with him. And then the whole thing happened with Brandon Crawford. And you thought, okay, Brandon Crawford's moving out, so Luciano can come in. They get Nick Ahmed. And it almost feels like they've been trying to avoid the fact that Marco Luciano is not a shortstop. And then they bring him up. They move off of Soler, right? And everybody said, well, they moved off of Soler so that he can get at-bats. He's had around 20 at-bats so far. And now they're going with Harar Encarnacion at DH. I also don't know why Marco Luciano just hasn't been moved to the outfield at this point. In total, how do you feel like everybody wants a stud shortstop, right? It feels like they're growing on trees for all these other teams, but the Giants can't, and we'll get to Tyler Fitzgerald a little bit later. How do you feel like the Marco Luciano situation has been handled?
Yeah, it's been an interesting storyline to follow this year. It looked like an early going that he just isn't built to be a shortstop. I think his defense looked a little bit better last year. It looks like it took a step back this year. The Giants, I think, are coming to the realization that he isn't a shortstop. They've, even with Sacramento, they moved him off of shortstop a little bit. He's been seeing more time at second base. And even after that Soler trade, they said that the DH was going to open up at bats for Luciano. That hasn't necessarily been the case, but it's another sign that they don't really see him as a shortstop going forward. I mean, things could change. It's just, when you look at how everything's played out this year, it just feels like they're starting to second guess that idea that he can be an everyday shortstop going forward. So yeah, it's been an interesting. Their handling has been interesting, especially since he's sat the past couple of games. It feels like, if he's going to be on the bench, they might as well send him back down to Sacramento.
Talking to Jeff Young, editor for Round the Foghorn. Do you think, Jeff, that Farhan gets too much hate? I know you stick to the numbers, and you actually, and I'm trying to put you on the hot seat because you're very good at not necessarily going in any direction as far as opinions. But what do you think about the Farhan situation? Do you think he gets too much hate, or do you think that he's had a long enough runway and we need to see some results?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say after, he's in his sixth year, I think it's fair to say that, he's had enough of a leash that the Giants have to, produce on the field at this point. That hasn't been necessarily the case for the most part. For his tenure, they've been kind of running in place. There just hasn't been enough development with the farm system. Of course, this year it's been different because we've seen some guys like Fitzgerald and Heliot Ramos Birdsong and Kyle Harrison and all these guys look like they could be, roster mainstays for years to come. But to answer your question, whether he gets, some unwarranted hate or not, I don't know if I can say. I mean, it does feel like some of it is just, directed toward his alignment with analytics. And, even if they replace Fansided at the end of the year or 2 years from now or 5 years from now, they're probably going to replace him with somebody who's got an analytical bend, running the front office. So it's not like Fansided is all that unique in terms of how he uses analytics at this point. Most of the front offices do. So I feel like there's something there with Zaidi and analytics and baseball, and some people just not really buying into that.
Talking to Jeff Young, editor for Round the Foghorn. Two names, Jeff, and I want to ask, do you think they're for real? And the first name I will say is Tyler Fitzgerald. He's on a tear like we haven't seen before, doing things we haven't seen. I know Trey Turner is obviously still playing, but besides Trey, who's also a stud in his own right, talk about the stud shortstops, Tulo and Alex Rodriguez, Tyler Fitzgerald, do you think he will be the shortstop of the future for the San Francisco Giants, or is it still too early to tell, no matter how hot he is right now?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at his profile, there's certainly some red flags that stick out. His strikeout rate is pretty high. He's offsetting that with a lot of power, so that's good. His BABIP, or batting average on balls in play, is due to regress at some points. One thing Fitzgerald does really well, and it's not the most analytical thing, but it's kind of the buzz phrase of 2024, in my opinion, is that he pulls the ball in the air a lot. And that's the best batted ball outcome you can get. You can look at the numbers. Players who pull the ball in the air, it usually translates to extra base hits and home runs. And he does that a lot. He's a pretty dead pull hitter. And it's something he does at a healthy rate. And if he continues to do so, he can carve out a career as a major leaguer. I wouldn't expect him to, OPS over 1,000 or anything like that, which is where I think he's at the moment. But I think he's shown enough. He's got a power speed combination that the Giants just don't have much of. And he's versatile enough. He's done a nice job at shortstop. I haven't looked at the numbers from a metrics standpoint, but just from the eye test, he's looked capable defensively at shortstop. So it feels like if it's not going to be Marco Luciano, they might have lucked themselves into another alternative at shortstop for years to come. But really, it's going to be how he finishes the season, how he adjusts to when the league adjusts to him. That's kind of a big next step for Fitzgerald.
Talking to Jeff Young, like I said, had two names for you, editor for Round the Foghorn. The second name, you know who it is, Heliot Ramos. Is he the real deal? I know we've seen some reports that they want to get him, and I actually have a 1B question that keeps, and I know, Yastrzemski plays right field so well, and I get it. It is a unique right field, but if you think Heliot Ramos is a corner out, isn't there some combination? If you want to get him out of center, couldn't you put Yastrzemski in center and I know they have a couple center fielders coming up, but couldn't you put Yastrzemski in center and put Heliot Ramos in left or something like that? But besides including the defense, but in general, is Heliot Ramos the real deal? Is he going to be an outfielder for the Giants, or at least in the major leagues for years to come?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what he's shown this year, is that he could be an everyday major league outfielder. Probably not in center field. I feel like that's a stretch for him. And the some of the defensive miscues that have happened over the past few months with him, like I really don't blame him. It's really more on the Giants not having a viable alternative to Jung Hoo Lee at center field. So it feels like center field's a stretch for him. They should, in my opinion, switch Yastrzemski and Ramos with center field and right field. I feel like that would be a better outfield alignment, but for some reason, Bob Melvin's sticking with Ramos in center field, and that's led to mixed results. But yeah, I mean, it looks like he's an everyday outfielder, a guy who's going to hit for good power. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Fitzgerald. He didn't necessarily come out of nowhere. He was a highly regarded prospect coming up, but he had a couple of down seasons leading into this one. And just really kind of burst onto the scene and took hold of a position. And it looks like he's going to be here for years to come.
Jeff Young, go check out everything he does at Round the Foghorn and follow him on social media, on Twitter, on X, if you are a Giants fan. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy your weekend, and we will talk to you. If the Giants do sneak in, Jeff, we got to have you back on.
Sounds good. I'd be happy to chat baseball. Thanks for having me on, guys.
That was Jeff Young, editor for Round the Foghorn. And when we come back, we will be joined by Emil Fergoso. See, everybody, people were talking on the chat mob and the text line. Oh, we didn't know Michelle Dapper is a Dodger fan. Look, we remedy it. Everything is balanced. Okay. Now we had, and